Believe it or not, one of the most requested remakes is Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door. Fans have been doing this pseudo creation for years, taking Dolphin emulators, putting HD texture packs, and Nintendo has actually responded with a remake for Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door. The remake is more of a similar vein to Super Mario RPG, where it acts a little bit like a remaster, but also has influences of a remake, and we'll talk about what that means. They're basically taking the original experience and lovingly recreate it on new modern hardware, making it easily accessible for everyone and adding a couple new amenities along the way. Unfortunately, while there are some cool features that I do want to highlight in this game, you're going to see that some features really make us wish that we were still playing on the Gamecube. Let's talk about the graphics and how this game works. Clearly, one of the biggest and most obvious presentation about this game is the 4:3 to 16:9. Of course, the original GameCube experience came out in around 2004, presenting in a 4:3 aspect ratio. It was also one of the few GameCube games that did 480p, really taking advantage and pushing the GameCube to almost its limits. The 16:9 is such a lovely inclusion, allowing you to see more of what the 4:3 wasn't allowing you to see, and of course the HUD has been completely remade in-game as well as in battle, and taking advantage of that 16:9 real estate. It really is a great and nice touch. Something that I really do appreciate, that Nintendo really took time to redo the entire menu system as well as some of the features using 16:9. The models look spectacular. One of the problems I did have with the GameCube, while the game was lovely and crisp, when you started blowing up some of the models, you really started to see some of the little pixels. I wouldn't say it took me out of the experience, but it was definitely something that caught my eye quite a lot. What's nice about the Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door remake is that the models have been lovingly recreated. They look almost exactly like their counterparts but have a higher texture count, making it easier on the new Switch hardware. Everything is lovely and crisp, and even when you start to increase some of your characters and make them even bigger, it still looks great to see how they are on full 16:9. Surprisingly, some of the characters also do brand new emotes and are a little bit more animated than their original counterparts. A great example right here is Luigi telling his, oh my god, I love his story so much. And see how excited and happy he is animated when he's speaking, or maybe even Frankly or some other characters, seeing them speak and talk and really having new emotes that were not in the original. Nintendo really did go back and take time to make sure that the way some of the characters animated really brought more life to their characterization. Lighting is a brand new system here. Some of the areas in the GameCube look pretty bland and poorly lit. I don't really think lighting was a focus when it was coming into this game, but you can really tell with this overhaul, it just looks absolutely wonderful. Frankly's lab is just beautiful and has such warmth, with the books looking a little dusty, and the lighting just really enhances that. The way the sun kind of cascades into the middle of Rogueport is just a lovely experience, and even the way there are some new lighting in some of the sewer sections as well. I always thought that this game was just absolutely beautiful. I have even noticed some screen space reflections when walking by certain reflections such as water or some parts that are of metal construction. I was even surprised to see that now the game takes more advantage of the paper aesthetic, where you can see some of the pipes in the background having more cardboard that are building them up. I'm not saying that the original wasn't having that aesthetic, but I can definitely tell that this version really prioritized that much more, and because of the new hardware, I was able to emphasize that even more. But the biggest and the worst take that I have seen in this version is the frame rate. I don't know how the GameCube did it, but using 480p and 4:3 on the GameCube running at 60 FPS, it's a feat in itself. Not many GameCube games ran at 60 FPS, but when they did, they were such beautiful and crisp experiences. I always felt like the 60 FPS fidelity was a part of Paper Mario, and it made battles quicker, easier, and made timing inputs that much more satisfying to make. That's been cut completely. Instead, you have a 30 FPS cap, so battles will feel much more sluggish. Timing input doesn't really have much of a delay, but you still do feel that it's just not as impactful as in 60 FPS. Traversing the world also has a pretty poor fidelity rate. It's something I'm not appreciative. I really wish there was some way that Nintendo could fix this, but 30 FPS is the best you're gonna get, and that really, really sucks. For many people, myself included, I might actually still go back to the GameCube because of how used to I'm using the 60 FPS. 30 is just pretty much ruining the entire game for me. It's weird to see that a remake slash remaster is going back from its original fidelity and going worse, even though we're getting better lighting. I don't know why Nintendo did that. I would have loved to see different modes maybe presented in here. For example, maybe reduced lighting or excluding the lighting, but still having the 60 FPS fidelity. It's just little things like this that I'm just really disappointed with, and I don't know why Nintendo decided to revert to 30 FPS. It's a huge mistake. All right, let's go into audio. It's gonna be a mixed bag for a lot of people. Paper Mario includes some brand new remix tracks, taking all of the tracks from the original, remixing them and bringing them to a new presentation. I think it'll be welcome for most people who have already played Paper Mario or who are new into it and want to find a new experience into it, but for people like myself who feel that the original tracks should not be messed with, while there is more of an avenue to get there, you still can do that. The original nostalgic tracks are still very much implemented and you can use at your will, but it does take a little bit of time to get into that. But it's still early in the game enough where it's not much of a bother. After your first visit to the Thousand-Year Door, you gain access to the badge shop. You go up to the second floor right across from the inn and you're able to purchase the nostalgic badge for about 1 coin. Equipping it uses no badge points, so it's easy to use. You can take it off and on at your will. And I think this is how the game should be played, at least in my opinion. I'm very much used to the old tracks, and anything that kind of deviates away from that is just a weird experience in itself. Of course, there are going to be new tracks that have never been used before, so those will overlay some of the old tracks during some sections of the game or emoting some emotional sections when you're speaking with characters. But regardless, I think most people will prefer to keep it like this. Well, I do prefer the simplistic nature of the original Paper Mario soundtrack. Sound effects are also weird in this version as well. I would say about a good 75 to 80% of the sound effects that you hear are not in the new version of Paper Mario. While you do hear some familiar ones such as the text box or some characters speaking, there are some new sound effects that were not in the original, most likely due to a loss of the sound bites or some of the assets used in the original game, and instead have brought in some newer sound effects. I don't feel like a lot of them hit hilarious moments, and changing the sound effects does change the feel of the game. It might not be that big of a deal, and maybe I'm overreacting for some people, but for someone who has played this game over 13, 14 times in my lifetime from start to finish, it's just completely weird to hear some sound effects that you're so used to completely different and not really hitting that funny mark or really bringing more out of the character. And speaking of bringing more out of the character, you also hear Banjo-Kazooie-like grunts coming out most of the characters, if not all. So the original game used a text box sound effect that characters were speaking, but they never really had any sound effects when speaking as well. In this version, some of the sound effects that have been coinciding with a lot of the Mario characters have now been brought over here. For example, when Goombas are speaking, they have a similar sound effect as they do in Super Mario 64. as well as Koopas. While I don't have a problem with this form of sound effect, but my problem is the actual length of the sound effect. Let me explain. Let's take Banjo-Kazooie for example. When many of the characters are speaking or talking with you, they also have a sound loop that's going for a couple of seconds. That way it doesn't feel that repetitive or annoying when you're listening to it. The Paper Mario one is a very different, as sound effects loop every second, so it actually starts to get annoying hearing the same sound loop go over and over and over. You could make that comparison with Banjo-Kazooie, but I felt that game was much more tasteful with how it uses these kind of sound bites, and it actually took a while for them to loop. And it's an experience I'm not the happiest with. I really wish there was some way to at least bring it to the original. It's not as annoying, but what do you guys think about that one? I want to hear your thoughts. Luckily, gameplay feels almost exactly the same with very slight amenities just to make the gameplay a little bit better. The controls are very nice and easy to use whether you're using handheld mode or a pro controller. I never really felt like I had a problem using this control layout at all. Felt very nice and easy to use, and some of the mappings I think were very smart, and it just feels like a very lovely controlling game. Unfortunately, I'm not happy with the frame rate, but it doesn't affect gameplay in the sense of using timed inputs, and if anything, even though Nintendo did bring down the frame rate, it doesn't really take away from making a lot of these inputs, which is cool. I do appreciate that you can still play how you can in the original despite me not liking the fidelity, but you can still make those controls regardless. There have been very little quality of life changes, but some do exist. Switching partners can now be on the fly. While this implementation was already in the original, what makes this a little unique is that it feels just a little bit snappier. So for example, if you need to remove paper from a wall using Flurry, you can do that instantaneously, or you could switch to another character no problem. In the original, you really either had to use a hotkey, which did go into a menu and took a little bit of time to go into, or go into the main menu and switch that character entirely. And also Goombella makes a really nice change with this as well. Goombella's ability is a very, very useful one using the tattle check, allowing you to check your enemy's stats, their abilities, and how much health points they have. In the original, if you tattled at least once and you want to check their stats, you either have to go back into the menu after the fight or you have to tattle again. What's nice about this, if you need to check all of their stats, there is a plus sign that allows you to check their stats once more. So you can keep looking at that after you use it so you don't waste a turn to look at what you have to do. And that's great. Those little changes have been very, very appreciative the entire experience for me. But what are you guys' thoughts? Is this how you're going to be playing Paper Mario on the GameCube version as tried as true? Boring lighting, but man, does the fidelity really make the experience? Or are you preferring the Switch version, which is 16:9, new audio, new character sound bites, and new ways to play this game? Let me know down in the comments below so we can have a good discussion. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. It's taken a lot of time for me to get back into the groove of content creation because I've just been so busy with work and life and trying to get that kind of grounded before I go back into content creation. I still love what I do here, and I'll still continue as much as I can. But I also want to say thank you to these people for supporting and taking time to support the channel. And also, if you want to see other videos and comparisons I do, right here you can see everything I've done. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you very soon.